Okay, so now we move on to the section to one-sided limits. In one-sided limits, you're plugging in, so we're still plugging in just like we've been doing. There's three different cases again. You plug in a number and get an answer. Great. You plug in a number and get 0 over 0, do more work. Great. You plug in a number and get a number over 0. Now it changes a little bit here. Because we're only looking at one side, we don't have to worry about if it meets or not. So we're only looking from the left or from the right. So does not exist is no longer an option in a one-sided limit because we don't care if it meets or not. We're just looking at it strictly from the left, one side, or strictly from the right. So for these, we're still going to plug in, just like we did with the other ones. Okay, in this first one, I'm taking the limit as x approaches 4. Now keep in mind that is not a negative 4. It looks negative because it's got a little minus, but what that minus means is from that side. I'm plugging in a regular 4. If I plug in a regular 4, I get 4 plus 4 over 4 minus 5. So in the top I get 8, and in the bottom I get negative 1, and my answer is negative 8. Okay, so I gave you a little trick there. Remember that your basic limit rules still hold. If you don't get anything over 0, that's your answer. So you still have the same type that you've had earlier. Plug in, get an answer. Okay, at this point they start to get a little more complicated. In my next one, I'm going to plug in the number 5, straight up 5. 5 plus 4, 5 minus 5. Okay, so that gives me 9 over 0. In a one-sided limit, that means it's either going straight up or straight down. 50-50 shot at getting it. So what I have to do is decide which side of 5 I'm going to plug in. So I'm going to plug in on the left side of 5. On the left side of 5, I have the number 4. So plug in 4. 4 plus 4 over 4 minus 5. That gives me 8 over negative 1. Okay, I don't care about the value, I care about the sign. This is a negative I don't care about the value, I care about the sign. This is a negative result. Since it's a negative result, that means it's going down, and my answer is negative infinity. Now, you'll notice that in the last two problems, one time you got 8 over negative 1 and it gave you an answer, and the second time you got 8 over negative 1 and it gave you infinity, negative infinity actually. So the reason for that is that one of them ended up being over 0. If it's over 0, that means it's got to be an infinity answer, either negative or positive infinity. And when you plug in to get that negative 8, that negative 8 tells you up or down. In the top one, you didn't have a number over 0, so that was just plug in, get your answer, go about your business. And so that's the difference there. Okay, so again, this answer, clearing that up, your final answer for that one is negative infinity. Okay, let's go to the 7 one. The limit as x approaches 7. We're going to plug 7 into the top, and we get 7 plus 21. And we'll plug 7 into the bottom, we get 7 minus 7. So we get 28 over 0. Okay, that lets me know it's either negative infinity or positive infinity. Now, I'm going to plug in something on this side of 7. That's the higher side of 7. So higher than 7, I would plug in 8. So when I plug in 8, I get 8 plus 21 over 8 minus 7. So I get 29 over 1. Now I don't care that it's a 29, I care that it is a positive result. Since I get a positive result, my answer is going to be positive infinity. Now let's talk about secant again. Here we go again with the trig. If I'm plugging in the secant, I know secant. Let me change my color again. This would be the limit as x goes to pi over 2 from the right side of 1 over the cosine. Okay, we worked one of these in our last video, so this would be 1 over the cosine of pi over 2, which would be 1 over 0, which means it would either be positive or negative infinity. So what I need to do with this one is I need to plug in something on the right side of pi over 2. Okay, so here's pi over 2 right here. This would be my quadrant 1 area. All the values, let me spell it right, all the values from 0 to pi over 2. I know everything's positive there. And this would be my quadrant 2 area. That would be all of my values from pi over 2 to pi. I know in this quadrant 2 area, in quadrant 2, I know the cosine is negative. So that means as I approach pi over 2 from this particular direction, my answer is going to be negative. So that lets me know that I'm going to negative infinity. Now, one of the reasons I picked this particular one is I wanted to make sure that when you were working these, you weren't thinking that this sign right here told you which infinity it went to. It does not. That sign right there tells you which way you're approaching pi over 2. It doesn't have any bearing on the answer of the problem. So that little pi over 2 just tells you, that little plus sign just tells you which side of pi over 2 you are looking over.